And let me make the segue to the video that you just showed, which is just supremely excellent, which is, again, people say, like, what is different with this technology than the past technology? So if you sort of think about jet engines, right? We don't need to understand sort of aerodynamics and physics and mechanical engineering to be able to fly a jet plane, right? To fly in a jet plane, we just get on it, and it just takes us from point A to point B. Or you think about power generation, or you think about telecoms. We just use the technologies because that's all we do. We don't need to understand how electrons move, right, in a power generation system, or how electrons move in a telecom system. It just works. The difference with AI, and the reason why we think this is a business challenge and not just a technological challenge, is that AI is going to change the way you run your company. AI is changing the way it's running your company. And so you no longer have the choice to black box it and leave it aside. You have to, as a leader, take it on and understand what's at the guts of it. And guess what? You will not just be buying it off the shelf. Most likely you'll be deploying it, you'll be putting it to use. And that's why it's important for you to become a student of this and know how to lead your organizations in this transition that all of us are being faced with. So with that, I want to sort of give you a sense of our panel and how we're going to run it. So we have leaders from the energy sector, from agriculture, from technology, from telecoms and finance with us today. And I'm going to do one-on-one conversations with each of them. It's going to be almost like a speed conversation. And so I'll introduce each one of them one at a time. Overall, this Jason Krizan from Woodside Energy, Michael Gomes from Topcon Agriculture, Wembu Kenya from Elephant Ventures, Meghna Sina from Verizon, and Shari Smiley from JP Morgan AI Research. And each of us will go through basically what is happening in the industry and what executives need to know about that. And so that's the way we're going to run. So first, I'm going to call on Jason Krizan. Jason, if you want to reveal yourself to the rest of the world with us. And Jason, let's just get right into it. You've been both at NASA and now in the past few years in the energy sector at Woodside Energy in Australia. How is AI changing the energy sector as you see from your perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Kareem, and thanks for having me as well on this important topic. I think it's one of those things where we actually don't even realize how much it's going to change across our energy sector. Within Woodside, I mean, we've started down the AI journey several years ago on just simple things of making plants smarter. So we produce liquid natural gas as a company. We transport that from Australia to customers around the world. And one of the key things that we've been learning is we have very old facilities. So how do you make old facilities new facilities again? So from that kind of sectors to our future vision of actually how do we have autonomous facilities, smart enough facilities that actually run safely, more efficiently, and help us and actually make the decisions how to run that facility to maximize an outcome, whatever that outcome is.
Right, and so of course the energy sector is pretty big in Africa. So give us some examples from your own settings in Woodside as to how AI is being deployed concretely within the operations of Woodside.
Yeah, I'll give you a really concrete example. So we've been operating liquid natural gas facilities. We produce about 6% of the world's LNG. And those facilities have been operating for 35 years, or even 40 years in some cases. So some of those facilities are really old. So with old facilities comes not very smart sensors and those types of things, analog dials and devices, things like what we call oil sight gauges. Oil sight gauges are basically oil feeders for rotating equipment in order to make sure they stay lubricated. Our current old way of doing that was actually sending people around to actually take a look at those gauges and then top them up with oil as needed. We also operate in 40 to 50 degrees heat all the time, ambient temperature. So it's not a very pleasant task. So one of the things we've done with AI is actually taking cameras and then through machine learning algorithms, those cameras monitor the oil levels. They actually take that old analog type sensor and convert it into a digital tag or a digital sensor for us now. So old equipment converting into the modern, what we actually need. for a couple $100 of actually refurbishing a plant, basically, and bringing it into the 22nd century or 21st century of actual algorithms. We then take that data and feed it into our overall digital twin of the facility that pulls all of our normal digital control systems and such. And now these smart sensors now bring in all the analog things that we were never able to automate before. We collect that data, and now we can do even more optimization for the facility.
Great. Any other examples? Say a bit more about the digital twins you guys are trying to build and why that's so important for Woodside as well.
Yeah, so one of the big challenges we have in the energy sector is the cost of bringing something to market. So one of the things that we've been doing is actually creating digital twins of our facilities in order to lower our unit production cost. The lower we can bring that unit production cost, the more energy we can bring to the market, and the more projects we can actually get to. So one of the things we're doing with the AI then is deploying that so we can bring more energy to the market, and basically create autonomous plants of the future. So we think about, and everybody talks about autonomous cars powered by AI and such, but we actually think about plants running on level 4, level 5 autonomy with decision making in those facilities, so that one day, instead of our facility operators actually making every setting change themselves, what that does is the computers have already set the facility for the best outcome for that day. The one analogy I like to use is we operate really big refrigerators in a massive heated area in Australia, so Western Australia, very hot area. One of the things that AI is actually allowing us to do is think about, maybe today is actually not the best day to maximize production, because in 3 days from now, the weather's going to be 3 degrees colder. That 3 degrees colder allows us another 10% efficiency of an outcome. So the actual software and digital twin recommends that we actually turn the facility down, do more maintenance today, because in 3 days from now, we can actually optimize production. And that's the type of decision making that is counterintuitive to our industry, which is make all energy at all times and as much efficiency as possible, where actually it's a counterfactual of actually slowing the facility down and using that window of opportunity for production, because we know more about it, and the computers then help us make that decision for production changes that are going to happen 3 days from now.
Great, thank you, Jason. One advice you would have for our leaders that are here learning about AI, what advice would you give them based on your experience at both at NASA, where you did a bunch of AI projects there, as well as at Woodside?
Yeah, I just chalk it up to this: go try things, and that's kind of been my own mantra: is just jump in, do a project within your organization, within your company. Start with something small, like we did with a small sensor, and just do it. You'll learn some things about it, and then you'll start discovering how it can affect other areas of your business. So it doesn't have to be the perfect project. I always like to think about more shots on goals with my teams. So we try 20, 30 different things. And, you know, people tend to forget about the 5 or 6 that didn't work. And you start noticing the 10 or 15 that did work. So that'd be my advice: just do it and then start learning.
Great. Well, Jason, I know it's late for you in part, so thank you so much for joining us and sharing with our audience this great work that you've done at Woodside, and also giving a future in terms of what could be possible in heavy industrial settings that we don't think are AI native at all. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Next up, we're going to have Michael Gomes come in. Michael Gomes is at Topcon Agriculture. Michael, thank you again for joining us. As you know, agriculture is a big part of the African economy, and we see AI being deployed liberally across ag settings. So what is happening? Give us an update on what you see happening in terms of AI and agriculture globally.
First of all, thanks very much for this opportunity here on International Women's Day. And so most people don't think of women as farmers, but they're actually more than half of the world's farmers. And in many countries, specifically work-torn countries, they're the majority of the farmers. And so that really appreciate the opportunity to talk today to this group. So with respect to kind of where AI is today, our company, Topcon Agriculture, Topcon serves both construction and agriculture. And both of those two industries are really the last two that are beginning to go digital, or that are beginning down the process of digitization. And so, similar to what Jason was talking about, there's this production mentality of make the most, make the most, make the most. And so really a number of these tools and technologies are beginning to change that. And so for us, there is AI in our industry, but really it begins as sensors driving towards automation. And then from there, machine learning from those smart machines and we're just beginning aspects of AI. But those aspects are certainly coming in. In the developed world, those are smart connected machines working toward a system of systems with process control, focused at kind of this whole concept of agriculture as regenerative manufacturing. Whereas in the developing world, many of these solutions start a little bit more simple. They start as smart tractor implement combinations with providing on-time services or apps from the smartphone, so that then you can begin to utilize the camera to get data or different things like that. And so there are kind of a number of different examples that start to fit into that world, if that makes sense.
Great, Michael, great, awesome. So could you give us what you sort of see as some leading edge examples in the space of agriculture, both sort of at the forefront of where you see the future is, and then also, you know, what you sort of see are the steps that, you know, farmers need to take today in this journey. And and thank you for sharing with me that. I didn't realize that half the farmers in the world are women. I had no idea about that. So thanks for letting me know about that as well. But give us some examples here.
Yeah, sure thing. No problem. So I split a number of, when I was thinking through this topic, I looked at it from both the developed world side as well as the developing world side. And I think in many cases, the developing world will leapfrog past where the developed is, just from a number of different perspectives. But, you know, so some examples of this, right, I'll start off within the developed world, right? So there's smart implements, and these are implements that have a number of sensors on them that control, for example, today there are smart implements that control the speed of the tractor, so that then the feedback from the sensors actually speeds up and slows down the tractor or the rate at which the work occurs. That functionality is called TIM, Tractor Implement Management. It's implemented through a standard, through one of the ISO standards as an industry initiative. And in this case, right, when you begin to think of the first kind of self-regulating piece, that's the first piece of an optimized system. And so that's really where we start to get to, right? So there are smart all-electric platforms. For example, in the table grape industry, there's one that follows people, and that's from an innovative startup company called Burrow, right? Or full-size tractors from a startup company called Monarch. And that tractor could actually respond to hand signals. And so we're beginning to see the elements of all-electric platforms begin to come in a number of those kinds of things. From the predictive analytics side, you're beginning to see monitoring for on-time maintenance and replacement parts and scheduled maintenance versus unscheduled maintenance and a number of those kinds of things. It's not uncommon to begin to see semi-autonomous machines. So that would be one operator remotely interacting with and operating multiple machines. A good example of this is orchards is sprayers for orchards and vineyards, because here in states like California, 95% of the agricultural spraying of vineyards will occur at night. And so those kinds of things begin to occur. And so you're beginning to see these semi-autonomous platforms of a one to many beginning to come in, and those smart vehicles and implements that are there are also smart vehicles and implements that are beginning to use AI to recognize weeds and eliminate them, whether they're using high-speed cameras to take pictures of the weed amongst the crop. The definition of a weed is just a crop out of place. And so whether they're then using chemical tools or they're using a physical tool like laser, right? An example of the chemical tools is a startup company called Blue River that got purchased by John Deere, versus the lasers would be an example of a company called Carbon Robotics. That's a startup, right? And so you're beginning to see all of these things start to come into the landscape, and that whole industry is called see and spray. So then you can see it and spray it. And you're beginning to see a number of startups and a number of companies begin to enter that. When it comes to harvesting, there's things like autonomous picking machines in strawberries that operate day and night so that then they recognize strawberry ripeness for selective harvesting without people. And that's from a company called Advanced Farm Technology that's operating both in Florida and California. In the developing world, that begins to become more about contractor services model in machinery. They'll bring in and implement the machinery because that's the easiest way to bring technology to a new area and to introduce it, right? And so they'll do that from the services model. A startup company called Hello Tractor is using local agents to book online on-time services for these tractor implement combinations from a smartphone. And in many cases, they're doing that from booking the services through electronic payments. And in many cases, those agents can even become tractor owners. And so they use that as a fundamental step to begin to grow the business. Smartphones that are utilizing cameras and the online access to weed and pest databases, or in pest and disease libraries, or look at prescriptive treatments, right? We're beginning to get elements of matchmaking services so that then you can do those things. And so a number of our dealers are beginning to utilize, in many cases, training programs specific to women as equipment operators. Most people don't know, but women are actually pretty well known as better equipment operators than most men. They're much more detail oriented, and they really do a nice job of working with the machine rather than working against the machine and those kinds of things. And so, for example, one of our dealers is operating in Kenya as well as Uganda, and they've got these programs whereby they do training for these operators so that way these operators then can go out into the industry, and then oftentimes that becomes the first beginning building blocks of becoming an entrepreneur in that system.
Michael, just some fabulous examples, both in emerging markets and in developed economies. This is just great. Michael, what advice do you have for those in the agriculture sector as they think about AI and AI deployment and digitization overall? What would you sort of say would your advice be from what you sort of see in the industry?
Sure thing. Well, great opportunity on this one. And so I guess the first thing I wanted to do I wanted to frame up how people think of agriculture. And agriculture is really becoming regenerative manufacturing with sustainable production. And often that means that we're climate smart in a number of different examples. And so I guess that's the first thing is reframing a little bit of thinking about agriculture when amongst your executives. The second thing is that these smart connected equipment and services are a business model that is easy, that is relatively simple to implement, and it's the first step in which that you can use to build an economy, and that's significant. And so really then it's about smartphones and applications, as well as becoming familiar with these tools and technologies that are important for you, your nation, as well as your growing economy.
Great. Michael, Thank you again for taking the time. I know it's early in California,
Can I
so
ask
it's late for. Oh,
Chairman,
go ahead. Go
can I
ahead.
come
Yeah,
up with a
please go
question
ahead.
for Michael? Thank you,
Yeah.
Michael. That was fantastic. I feel like it was around the agricultural world in, a few minutes to understand all the technology. I'd heard of the one that you talked about, Hello Tractor. I think that was founded, if I'm correct, by an African-American operating in Nigeria. I think of it kind of as Uber for tractors. So small farmers who can't afford a tractor can just call one up, just like you might not be able to afford a car. So thank you. That was fascinating. I have a question for you that came in from the Reverend Claude Alexander, one of our very loyal listeners on these events. And he's asked this question, particularly Africa looks at agriculture oftentimes in conversations about economic development as a place to create jobs, that there's just so much opportunity. Africa has such fertile ground and the capacity to feed the world. And so it's interesting hearing you talk about how AI can do the jobs of humans. And so can I ask you, Michael, just to comment on that? How do you see these developments in terms of losing jobs in economies that need these agriculture jobs?
Sure thing. And so like anything else, right, agriculture as the lowest level of labor in an economy, really oftentimes in a lot of the world, it's people that are functionally illiterate or colorblind or those kinds of things. And so, agricultural labor is very, very hard. And it's hard on the people, and it's physically demanding. And so one of the things that you're beginning to see is that you're exactly right, is agriculture initially starts off as elements of a job program. But I think the thing that we also have to look at is that it's both decent work as well as rewarding work, and how is it that we bring it in and use that as a building blocks of an economy. And so I think that you're exactly right in the fact that agriculture and masses of people are start off in that respect. I think probably the sugarcane industry in Brazil is a great example of this. Is it used to be hand harvesting. It used to be that hand planting and hand harvesting, where they would burn the cane and then people would come in and hand harvest with machetes. That entire industry has moved over to a mechanical harvest situation using a high degree of automation, but the jobs and the quality of the work has gone up significantly. The wages go up significantly. The respect for the workers goes up significantly. The respect for the environment goes up significantly. And so I think that you're exactly right in that agriculture is the fundamental building block of an economy. But I think that there's also room for elements of these automation or these automated systems to provide good work, clean work, less demanding work on the people with higher wages that enables them to become all owners and entrepreneurs and really become fundamental cornerstones in the building blocks of the economy. Does that answer your question, Teresa?
Yes, thank you so much, Michael. It does indeed. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to connect to what Michael is saying about agriculture and the environment, I think increasingly there's good sense in environmental science that agriculture, if done right, can actually be a source of carbon sequestration, and that if you do it right, it can actually be a massive asset. So if you take these technologies, you enable the labor to use these technologies, you could potentially have a much bigger agricultural footprint that is both productive in the food and nutrition side of things, but also on the environmental side of things as well. So thank you, Michael, again so much for taking the time with us. Now I'm going to shift to Wembuye Kenya. Wembuye Kenya is with Elephant Ventures, and as we were designing this panel, of course, it made sense to have somebody come in and talk about agriculture. Of course, it made sense to come in and talk about energy sector. But the technology sector, I was like, no, the future of the technology sector is so important to Africa that I felt it was important that we don't often equate Africa and technology side by side as an important sector, but I thought this needed attention. And so I'm delighted to have Wembui Kenya. She's a colleague of mine from Mozilla. She's on the board of Mozilla Foundation, so she's my boss. Basically, I'm on the Mozilla Corporation board. She sits on the Mozilla Foundation board. Mozilla Foundation owns all of Mozilla Corporation. So I'm talking to my boss here, but Wembui will really talk through the technology sector and AI, and it was specifically with relationship to her experience in Africa. So Wembui, what's your perspective about AI in the tech sector and in Africa?
Sure. Thank you, Kareem. And what a wonderful opportunity to participate in this conversation, and certainly on International Women's Day. So it's really hard, especially since all the fantastic and just very attractive innovations have already been profiled in this session, to then speak about technology without speaking about the industries that have been represented, where we do a lot of work, and certainly where technology is important, and working with CEOs and CIOs, CTOs, in Africa is in sort of AI's impact on business and productivity. And so I think I'll perhaps make it a little less sexy and sort of speak to it in that context. And I think sort of at a high level, the more spoken about changes around sort of AI and its impact in technology, but also in technology's impact on business and productivity is certainly in the ability to reduce human error. I think these are sort of more obvious. Faster decision taking, because there's less bureaucracy given what has been learned from repeated behavior, faster processing, managing the utility of resources. I think there's a lot of consideration by CEOs around like cloud management and the ability to serve and serve quickly in terms of their business productivity, 24/7 availability. I think the intelligence there is less about whether a server is up or down, but certainly in terms of the productivity of code and sort of lines of code. And then I think one last one is maybe like the reduction in repetitive and tedious tasks on the team. I think AI has dramatically improved the efficiency of our workplaces, and certainly in the tools that are more self-serving, even in our ability to be more productive as software engineers. And so that's another area. But I was trying to pull out what I thought would be of greater interest in terms of where AI has started to impact for CEOs and CTOs. One of the areas has been from a business productivity is, and we saw a really big increase in this during the pandemic, because there's customer facing AI. And I think in Africa, we've seen a lot of companies and entrepreneurs and startups come up with sort of inventions around chatbots. And I think what's been really interesting that given that more and more organizations have now shifted to these chatbots, sometimes as the only line of customer interaction, but it's in inventions, and this is, I think, also as a Mozillian, great excitement around the natural language generation and how that's becoming more and more mainstream. So you're able to convert natural language into software code to generate answers to questions. So it's less sort of the hard coded, but it's sort of building the question responses given the better understanding of natural language. I think what I found to be top of mind has certainly been the automation of processes. This is an area where for most enterprises, it's really wanting to seek faster and more reliable ways to streamline and automate. But now there's more and more products and services that allow for sort of really process discovery. So even going beyond sort of what has been manually documented as requiring automation or requiring digitization, is the ability for AI-informed software to be able to find out and to be able to tell you where there's potential blocks and where there needs to be greater automation. The other is what I call the race for data, and I think is more productive data. And AI is perhaps, I think, as productive as the amounts that it is of data that it is fed. I think organizations increasingly need solutions that build more flexible data pipelines and the ability to evolve and support thousands of sources, incorporate structured and unstructured data, and provide it in a way that we're not only relying on data scientists and they're harder and harder to find, but certainly making business leaders and technology leaders more able to interpret and to be able to get smarter around data. The other one is really around productivity. And I think this is when you think about software engineering, how do we enable for more efficiency and productivity? And I think there's a lot of ways that AI has continued to enable this in terms of how can we perform some of the more mundane and basic tasks. The other day, someone was asking me, can you help me find developers who can build me a website? And I said, well, who builds websites anymore? Especially if it's a non-functional website. There sort of are ways that that can be done, and increasingly so. And then the other one that I thought was quite interesting, and we've got clients that are always asking us about this, which is there's been a lot of work done around segmentation engines and sort of better understanding what experiences customers are seeking. And it's less, especially in the ad space, about what you are serving, but in those interactions, what are you capturing and then evolving in terms of what the customer is seeking. So I think those are sort of some areas that I would reference.
No, fantastic examples of and I think what you're sort of highlighting again is, what Kay, from the World Economic Forum got us going with initially, which was to say that AI is basically getting inside of all types of operations of companies, and it's both the customer-facing side, the back-end side, the process sides, but then also the production side. Like, how do we actually keep generating these things? And there's lots of opportunities here for leaders to think about this systematically. Maybe given where you're at, at Elephant and your prior experience in Della, can you just give us a sense of the technology sector in Africa and how leaders should be thinking about the technology sector in general and how AI fits into that as well?
Sure. So certainly with corporates and enterprises, I think there's still a big push towards digital transformation. And what does that look like? And I think before I joined Andela, I was at ThoughtWorks, and I think the conversation there was still about digital transformation, but I think the context in which it is being discussed today is slightly different. Whereas 5 years ago, it was really about understanding what digital transformation is and can it have an impact on my business. And now I think there's sort of an urgency around the ability to be fully embraced it, we fully understand the impact, but how quickly can we not only find the people, and I'll speak a little bit about sort of talent and what that means for the ability to embrace AI, but also in terms of what is the orchestration, what are the delivery patterns, what is evolving in the way technology gets delivered that AI can inform. And that's where I think that there's a lot of opportunity to continue to test and iterate, but also to really consider ways to partner with entrepreneurs in terms of technologies that might make it easier, especially in areas of differentiation, but then also to really leverage the tools that have already been built that might make it a lot easier to embrace things like process automation, and certainly building customer experiences for a very evolving customer base that is a lot more aware about sort of how they make selections and how selections are made for them. And so who are they in that conversation when a customer is considering product or service is also a big consideration for a lot of corporates and enterprises. At the what I would call medium enterprise or sort of well-funded startup, if I can call them that, I think it's just really more the how can they work faster, given they don't always have the resources to build, and how can they leverage AI tools for productivity, but also for pivots and sort of making sure that they can re-engineer or not even have to engineer portions of what it is, and the reusability of libraries and frameworks, and just sort of the ability to pick and choose and piece together more productively. And then at the startup, I think it's really in trying not to reinvent what doesn't have to be reinvented, and really trying to figure out where can we differentiate as a startup. And I think that there's a couple examples that I can think of companies where it may also exist outside. So these inventions may not be new to the world, but certainly how they are made accessible to small and medium businesses can be differentiated in what they build in Africa.
Right. And tell us about talent. Like, how do we get talent? What you've seen talent from a Dendala perspective, from the ThoughtWorks perspective, and Elephant as well. What do you say? What is your prognosis on talent around AI and digital for Africa?
Sure. There's certainly, and without doubt, a talent drought. And I think I mean, we can refer to the McKinsey Global Institute reports around the jobs to be lost. But I think even for the people who, when I sort of think of talent as a pyramid, where you sort of have your very highly skilled AI data scientists, and then perhaps at the base, sort of just people who are more digitally aware, the cadence in which they have to be upskilled feels like it is more pressured. There's a lot of people, and the world is becoming increasingly aware of talent that exists in Africa. So in Africa, there's a race for finding, but also retaining just talent as a whole. And so I think there's a need for CIOs and CEOs to really think about what are the core things that are really truly required of the staff that is ultimately building for differentiation, versus where can there be borrowed utility of services that provide some of the core operational processes, and then really focusing on the experience you're building for the talent in order for you to be able to keep them. But it's hard.
Yeah, totally. So in conclusion, Wambui, advice you would have for the women leaders that are here, both in person on Zoom and also on Facebook, on how to think about AI in the technology sector, specifically in Africa as well, given your purview?
Sure. I think lending again to talent. How are you hiring? Who are you hiring? How are you considering? What are the pieces that are most important to you that might benefit AI, and what are the pieces that actually are just more like operations and processes of record, where you can leverage technologies that exist already? And then where you do need to hire talent because you're looking for their cognitive and creative and critical skills, how are you engaging and keeping them? I think it is really easy to think about sort of what is exciting about AI, but I think there's also a responsibility that CEOs need to think about, which is really around topics that have been covered today: bias, and what is the influence of bias on what it is you are offering a service or product, but also really thinking about data and privacy. I think in Kenya that's become even more real for a lot of CEOs or for companies that are looking to operate in Kenya, and better understanding what are you collecting and how are you making that transparent and not manipulating, given where AI has advanced to. But I think similar to other panelists, it's just really an understanding what is most important for your business, getting a better sense of where there's been AI innovation or where you can apply AI innovation to differentiate. And then what's really important to just test and iterate. And for that, look for partnerships. It isn't always about building your own teams, but find the fluidity and finding those AI tools that can better serve you on things like productivity, but then also help you build your differentiation.
Thank you so much, Wambui. I really appreciate it. And again, I really am so grateful for you taking the time to talk to our audience. Thanks again. So just as a navigation, we started with energy and agriculture. We went to technology, and now we're going to go to telecoms. Again, a really critical industry for Africa. And so Meghna Sinha from Verizon is joining us. Meghna is part of the AI deployment teams at Verizon. So Meghna, thank you for joining, and give us a sense of how AI is being thought about in the telecoms industry and the purview you have from Verizon here in the US.
Fantastic. Good morning, Kareem. It's good to see you again. Yeah, so let me jump right in. So we are, I'm leading AI in Verizon. We are a roughly 2-year-old organization that is focused on industrializing AI. And what that means is that we're not just doing small projects, point-in-time modeling. Many companies, and even including us, have been doing that for years. And there's benefit in that. You want to predict how when your customers will churn. You want to predict all kinds of things in the company. But there's enough research done to show that 70 to 80% of the value of AI comes when you can incorporate it in a way that it's continuously deployed and continuously integrated into your business processes. So for the last two years, we've been focused on standing up the infrastructure and designing the kind of algorithms we want to have in place to think of AI as a pipeline, not just a point-in-time solution, not just projects, but productizing it, industrializing it. At Verizon or in telco, the last decade was all about two things transformed technology. Many companies is wireless and apps, right? Mobile apps. We saw companies that were mobile first. We believe that we are at the precipice of industries or companies that will come out because of 5G, AI, and blockchain. I think these three are going to be very important technologies. So we are thinking about how do we build the pipelines of data, the pipelines of models that don't not only work for the websites and the apps, but also kind of lead us into the future, can integrate with blockchain technology, work seamlessly as IoT devices starts to grow. You can see a future where a house can easily have 100 IoT devices. How are they going to communicate with each other? How are you going to manage that? So that's kind of the context of where we are focused on. I'm not hearing you. Did you go on mute?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Meghna, could you give us some examples of in the 2 years of work you've been doing into sort of industrializing the AI? And I think it's a very important concept because we talk a lot about in our work about the AI factory, how AI factory is going to be the core beating heart of organizations. So as you have started to sort of industrialize AI from point solutions to basically bringing it across the enterprise, what are some good examples you can share with us in terms of how Verizon is thinking about this and using this?
Yeah, no, that's great. And so for context, for anybody who's not in telco, there are like two big things in telco. One is how do you plan, build, and operate your network? And as we are moving towards 5G, it's billions of dollars in investment on an annual basis. So it's massive and it requires years and years of planning. Our CTO had said that we've been building 5G for 10 years, right? Like, so if you think about the investment worldwide, it's massive. The other side of it is our customers. And it's not just you and I, individual customers, but companies, right? Like business accounts that are on our network. So what is important is that this plan, build, and operate data is very well integrated with customer experience, how customers are using our information, what experience they're getting, how we are acquiring new customers, how we are retaining our customers. So for us, we think about these two entities and that they have to be connected. So we've actually been it's early stages, but we've been building our own digital twin. And digital twin generally is, it's nothing new. It's used in many industries. And you think about digital twin as modeling physical entities or physical assets. We're focused. We'll do that too. Like we are building digital twin of our cell towers and all that. But another track that's interesting to us is digital twin of our business processes. And that's where AI needs to be fully integrated. And some of the speakers before me talked about digital transformation. Digital transformation cannot happen unless the data and AI is fully integrated into the business process. And that's how the jobs change. That's how companies can change from the inside, as you said in the intro. So digital twin is very core to the focus area that we have. And we're thinking about multiple twins, the twin of a network that allows us to simulate capacity changes. And capacity changes could be that if you're in a city and if they decide to build a new hospital, you're not going to wait for the hospital to be built. You want to know 2-3 years in advance, how will that change consumption in that location for the households, for the businesses, everybody. So a twin technology would be important for us in that. And that impacts our marketing, our customer experience, all of those things. So that's why the network understanding connected with customers. So a set of connected digital twin is one. The other thing that's very interesting, and it's early experimentation day, is that edge AI. We've been experimenting with, if you have 5G in a facility, so we've been doing some experiments in the context of sports, for example. With computer vision, can you get live feedback in a game? Can the coach provide players live feedback because of 5G? So you are doing the compute on the edge, you're doing the inferences on the edge, and you can provide that. That's one use case. But the same application could be used in a business environment for the same. You can use images to get building data, and you can use it for security actions as well. So those are two probably some of the most cutting edge examples that we're working on.
Yeah, Meghna, it's a revelation to me when you sort of talked about digital twin of processes, because I'd never sort of heard about that in that kind of a context. It makes total sense. And you can imagine that if companies were to build digital twins of their processes, then their ability to anticipate, to change, to account for changes in competition and context would be so critical. And
Exactly.
it's a very interesting perspective that you
Yeah.
provided with us.
Two things are coming up. Like, see, one is there is advances in doing AI on synthetic data. So the whole point of digital twin is when it's cost prohibitive or you don't have the time or resources to figure out how the changes will impact. That's when you build a digital twin, because you don't have enough time or resources to measure it in the real world. You don't have history. And there is some good research of AI on synthetic data. So there is, again, we haven't gotten that far, but we are betting on some of the promises of, can you learn from synthetic data? Can you learn from a different market, different part of the world where the infrastructure changed, and how will that impact? So I think it's to your point, digital twin of processes is brand new, but there are some small pockets of experimentation and early exploration happening in that space.
Great. And then Meghna, advice you have for our CEOs that are here. What advice would you give them as they think about their AI journeys?
Yeah, I have two. One is, I see a lot of companies experimenting with POCs, and my strong opinion is resources are scarce in this space. Don't waste money on testing it out. I think AI at scale is proven. It's not easy. You still need to do a lot of work to scale it, but doing small point-in-time experiments, just like you still have to rebuild it for the pipeline version of AI. So I'm just not a big fan of like doing small POCs that go nowhere. It's like invest in building scaling AI. And I thought about it, like, it's like, yeah, for a big company, it makes sense, but would it make sense for a startup? And I've talked to enough people in the startup community as well. Like, if you're building a recommendation engine, for example, to personalize your experience, just build the whole pipeline. You don't have to do AI everywhere, but wherever you do it for scale.
Do it for scale.
The second thing I would say is that I've been standing up different practices in Verizon. So one of them is responsible AI. I think every industry, every company needs to invest and figure out what they want to prioritize within the framework of responsible AI. There's a lot there. Again, it's early days, but bias mitigation, risk assessment, all of those things have to be part of your toolkit.
Great. Thank you so much, Meghna, for enlightening us with your perspectives. Very helpful. Our final speaker is Dr. Cherise Smiley. Dr. Smiley is at JP Morgan AI Research. And just to put this in context, there was a headline in January in the FT, in the Financial Times, that said JP Morgan to spend $12.5 or $12.8 billion on technology this year in 2022. And I was like flabbergasted. It's like, a bank spending this much money. That's about a lot of money that goes into life sciences venture investing in the state of Massachusetts, where I'm from. So it's a lot of money. And Cherise is part of this team that's trying to figure out AI deployment in finance. And so, Dr. Smiley, thank you for joining us. And give us a sense of AI in finance. I mean, it's such a big area. It's financial services. What can you tell our audience about this?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to talk to you about this. Actually, one particular area I was thinking of might be a bit different from what people were expecting in financial services. Because when it comes to finance, you're thinking about strictly the numbers and from that particular perspective. But with my background in natural language processing, one of the things that I'm seeing is an emphasis on documents. So the financial services industry has to deal with tons and tons of documents coming in every day. So this could be things like looking at the regulatory requirements that come in, level, just the sheer number of emails that we're having to deal with on a daily and monthly basis, as well as these very long financial filings, for example, so like 10Ks, SEC filings, annual reports, and things like that. So these types of documents could be 250, 400 pages. And what we find is that a lot of times we're sending tons and tons of analysts who have to read through these things, or rather skim through them in search, but they're not really able to give it the time that it needs and deserves. So we're putting a lot of effort into natural language processing, for example, as one way to try to mitigate that.
And Cherise, what is that yielding for the business? So as you invest in those technologies, as you digitize those flows, what does that then reveal in terms of what businesses can do, what your bank can do with this?
Yeah, so think about the way that you interact with search engines today. So for example, Google or Bing or other search engines. We've moved from just asking simple keyword searches to being able to ask questions over the documents that we see. But we don't really have that in the document space, right? Where you're able to not only just think about a search term that you want to look for within a document and go through it that way, but to ask questions to those documents and being able to give back the answers. So we have thousands and thousands of analysts that are having to deal with this on a daily basis, where they are thinking about, for example, regulatory purposes, KYC, anti-money laundering, and other types of issues that they have to deal with. They're having to think of these questions and search through and read through the documents one by one, or they're having to route manually emails that are coming in and think about, okay, who should handle this, who should handle that. We're able to automate a lot of that type of work that people are having to do, and to give you this experience where you can ask the questions directly to the document and being able to get those answers back.
Yes, it almost seems like you're sort of creating like a superpower for these analysts, right? Because before you're like stuck in document hell, lots of paperwork coming your way, and you're like manually scanning PDFs trying to find a particular set of information. Now the systems are smart enough to basically give you the answers you're looking for as well.
That's right.
Yeah. So Cherise, how do you sort of see more broadly sort of AI being deployed in financial services or within JP Morgan? There's a lot of, you've got some of the best researchers, including yourself there now. Yep. How are you guys working? My sense is you didn't do a PhD in finance. Your PhD was an LP. So tell us about how this interaction between sort of the AI researchers that are at JP Morgan and then the bankers who may not even know how to spell AI. Like how do we connect the dots between them, and how do you guys work together?
Yeah, so we work on a number of different topics. I think Menga, she mentioned synthetic data generation. So that's one of the main aspects that we've been working on, and one thing that we think will help to release the data. So there's a ton of sensitive data within the bank that you can't necessarily expect or you wouldn't necessarily want to give access directly to researchers and to other AI teams across the bank to work on that data directly right off the bat. So we're able to build models on top of the synthetic data to generate that synthetic data for a variety of different topics, and then explore that space before actually working on top of the sensitive data that's available. But, by and large, our interaction with the bank has to do with understanding, different problems that people may be having and maybe wanting to work on. So this could be, as I mentioned, having to do with the document space itself, having to do with some of the bias and fairness and explainability issues that we're seeing within the AI space, modeling financial markets, privacy, security, cryptography, just there's a wide variety of different topics that we're having to deal with and help the bank work on.
Great, Charisse. So advice you would have for the women leaders that are here about AI? What's the final piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, I would say that, in addition to some of the things that you mentioned early on in your introduction about educating yourself on what AI can do, what AI can't do, I think one of my experiences in working with executives about on different AI projects is that there could be a sense that, okay, I just need to explain the problem and then I'll throw it over the wall and have the technologist solve it and they'll bring me back an answer. Whereas I think you have to be a bit more prepared to see it as an ongoing partnership where you bring your subject matter expertise and work in an ongoing way. So this could be a matter of like providing actual labeled data because there's a real dearth of labeled data, especially in the financial space. A lot of the data that is publicly available has been created on other domains, right? So it's not really tailored to the financial domain. And so we're having to create our own data and then to think about really like investing people into evaluating these systems, making sure that they work properly, and understanding that, yeah, you will have to put some time into the evaluation, every single aspect of the system and making sure that it works well.
Great. Thank you so much, Charisse, for spending time with us and letting us know what's happening in finance. Again, very interesting work being done along the way. And my